everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We really do appreciate you taking some time today to spend with us. This is part of a new series presented by Macmillan Education, where we are going to have regular forums for people to discuss, learn, and share experiences using technology in the classroom. We are thrilled to have Don Ehlers here today. Don's been at Northwest Missouri State since 1980. He's been working with university students for about 40 years. In 2012, he took over the general psych course and was in charge of the redesign. And he had been doing pre-quizzing as means of getting students a better method of learning and retaining information. He took that pre-quizzing to online and using our Learning Curve product, which is an adaptive quizzing product. And he's kept fairly substantial data over the past couple years on how this has worked in his class with large groups of students, and that's part of what Don is going to share with us today. You will all be on mute during this session. If you have questions, and we encourage you to submit them, please do submit them via chat, and I will read those questions at the end. Again, thank you, and I will turn it over to Don.
Great. It's good to be here and sharing with all of you. I need to be able to share my screen, I think, in some way. Is my screen shared now?
No. Did you click on the Share My Desktop button on the home page of the WebEx?
Got it now.
There you go.
That should have done it. Are we there now?
Yes, we are.
Great. Well, it's great to be here and great to be able to share with you for these few minutes that I have. The background is accurate in terms of my involvement here at Northwest and teaching of general psychology. I began teaching general psychology in the fall of 2009 as an adjunct, and after the first exam and my experience with the students there, I really wanted to find ways to help the learning process, and as was mentioned, I did a pre-test, actually review exams throughout the course. It seemed to me that that was an effective tool in helping people, helping the students to incorporate and to somehow remember the information a bit more. During those years as an adjunct and using the pre-test or review exam technique, I kept track of the students who would come to the review sessions where they could look over their review exams and compared their exam scores with those who didn't come to review sessions to give me a sense of the value of those review sessions. The outcome was quite significant, and therefore when I was asked to take a look at redesign, I wanted to make sure that I continued to find some way to incorporate test, retest, or some kind of review exam model into the redesign. So this is what I'm going to take a look at over the next several minutes, the evolution of past to present in terms of my course design, building the team, building relationships, SQ3R as the model of course delivery, getting continuous feedback, and then of course getting to the analysis of the use of Learning Curve, the adaptive quizzing program that I'm using in my general psychology course. The evolution, as I said, is I went from a classroom size of 45 to 60 students where my goal was not only to teach information but to develop relationships with the student. I felt that my presence with them was important in terms of being accessible. I wanted to be personal, and in doing so, I felt that I would be able to connect with them and keep them more engaged in the class. I found that to be true, and it was one of the things that I really enjoyed about the smaller classroom. The thing that happened for me when I was asked to do a redesign was, what was the question, how was I going to be able to answer the question of how to maintain the personal relationship when the classroom moved from 45 students to 80 to 85 students in each of 6 sections. I felt I wanted to continue the ability to have the student feel that they were more than a number, and certainly important to me on a personal basis as well as an instructional basis. So what I did was took a look at the work that was being done in immediacy and the research there, and how it was that I was able to develop those relationships. The next thing I want to do is make sure I built the team. In developing relationships, the team that I put together, myself as the lead instructor, and I had 2 adjuncts that I inherited when I started the redesign, and 1 graduate assistant. When I began in this role, the 2 adjuncts that were assigned to the redesign just prior to when I took it over, hadn't really experienced a cohesive team, and that was one thing that was definitely important to me. I felt that if we couldn't, among the team that was leading the coursework, if we couldn't work together and have a great relationship, it would be nearly impossible to develop that same kind of relationship with students as I wanted to. So that was one of the first things that I did is to build that team to help us come together. Looking at building relationships, immediacy is what I had mentioned. When I talked about building relationships, I really had no research to back that up. It was my own personal feeling. But when I did the redesign, I wanted to see what research was out there regarding building relationships in the classroom. And this term of immediacy came up for me. And instructional immediacy is the behavior that brings the instructor and students closer together in terms of perceived distance. The thing that was significant for me in the research on immediacy is that when I was looking at a larger classroom size, if we could still call students by name, if we could not be dependent on any of our PowerPoints, but rather using eye contact and walk around the room and get physically closer to the students in the larger classroom, we might still be able to maintain that sense of personal relationship that I believe is important not only for myself as an instructor, but also for the student to want them to come back, to encourage them to learn and read and become familiar with the material. So the research was helpful for me to see the correlation between positive learning and the development of immediacy in the classroom, which supported, again, our goal then of building relationships in the classroom. The course delivery model was something that I was unsure when I took over what model would work well. In general psychology, as you probably are aware, SQ3R was one of the techniques for personal studying that I had as part of the topics in the textbook. And as I was debating about a variety of techniques of course delivery, I thought about this SQ3R as a study technique, and I thought if it can work well in personal study, why couldn't it work well in course delivery? So I talked it over with several people and thought about the team that I was putting together and decided this would be something that I would give a try in its pilot form that first semester when I just had 4 sections of redesign and there were 2 sections of traditional. So what I did initially is on Mondays in the lecture format, I would survey or scan the chapter for the week on that Monday 50-minute section. That meant I needed to condense the material and go really quickly, have the student understand that in fact the lecture is the survey or the scan. It isn't meant for them to hear from me any great in-depth investigation into the material, but rather for them on Mondays to understand this is a familiarity exercise with what is in the textbook, probably before they've read it. And in fact, I would often say, I don't need you to read the material before Monday, but come on and take in the lecture format of the survey. Probably the most common complaint, if I could use that word, that I got feedback from students is I was going too quickly, I was going too fast, and they couldn't really take notes. My response to them is that in the model that I was utilizing, I really encouraged them to not take notes, but rather sit back, listen, and use the senses to take in the information of the overview of the chapter that they would be studying more in depth through the week. The Q, SQ3R, the Q is the questioning, and if you're familiar with that study technique, in the personal study, you take headings, twist them, turn them around into questions, and then as the student reads them, they answer the question. What we did with this delivery model was apply the Q to a Wednesday learning lab. So instead of Wednesdays having the 6 sections each in the full classroom, we had a retractable wall in the lecture room installed, and on Wednesday we brought that wall down, and we had 2 sections, 2 separate classrooms, then each led by one of the adjuncts in small group conversation, video presentation, exercises that they could get more in depth into what we saw as the key elements of any given chapter. Again, this allowed for more relationship building in the smaller group as well. I've appreciated the ability to have the adjuncts run these small group sessions so that I can come in and quite frankly, I'll just sit down in a small group and get to know the students in a particular small group that day, and I'll bounce back and forth from one of the classrooms to the other depending on which section I was in the previous week. So I'm able to, again, develop more personal relationships simply by being part of their small group conversation and also participating in that questioning on the Wednesday Learning Lab. The R that we have no control over in SQ3R is the reading. One of those R's, of course, the student has to take initiative and read, and we encourage that to take place anytime for sure after the Monday scan, but if they haven't done it by then, we certainly encourage them to do it after the Wednesday Learning Lab. Of course, in the SQ3R, the other 2 are retrieve and review. With the review exams, that was the, again, the model that I used in the pilot of the first semester that I found, and I found that it was, again, quite utilized, and I saw a significant difference in those who utilized the review exams versus those who didn't in exam scores. It was that summer then that I became aware of Learning Curve and studied it. I used it myself, shared it with my graduate assistant, and decided to utilize that and go to a strictly online component on Fridays. So now my model was scanning on Mondays, question in the Learning Lab on Wednesday, and then assigning an online component then on Friday. My biggest concern coming from the more traditional format was a feeling of guilt, I guess I would say, of not being a participant in giving the information on Friday, not being in class and teaching. Of course, I didn't get that kind of feedback from the students. They look forward to not having the classroom experience on Friday for the most part. So I had to figure out if, in fact, Learning Curve was something that was as valuable as I saw the review exams to be, and how could I keep students sort of engaged in that activity and making sure they did it. So I did it in a couple of different ways. Learning Curve has with it, for any chapter, 2 to 4 activities. And there's a baseline of competency for learning curve. Of course, it's an adaptive process, which means if they answer a question correctly, they go get another question, and it gets a little bit harder as they go. If they miss one, it goes back to an easier question. And this way, my sense was they weren't going to be stressed out about getting an A, B, C, D, or an F, but rather they could take their time and work their way to competency, and everyone who completed the activity got 5 points for each activity. So a chapter that had 2 activities, there would be 10 points available from learning curve. If they had 4 activities, they had 20 points that would be given to them for completing those activities. When I used it the first semester, I used the baseline that was the default that I received, and I wanted to make sure, because it was taking the Friday class, I wanted to make sure that the students were given enough information in this activity. So what I did in last fall, I doubled the difficulty. In other words, the default guaranteed that the student would be asked at least 5 questions of every one of the topics in that activity. So I doubled it so that every student would be asked at least 10 questions for every topic in each activity, which lengthened the time that they would have to spend to reach competency, but also it meant that they were going to be exposed and to the material, and the repetitiveness, the redundancy of the questions I felt was important in terms of their being able to learn and adapt to the information that was there. The other part of this model is that I wanted to just mention is the continuous feedback. I take the opportunity whenever I have a conversation with students to ask how they're feeling about the model and also how they're feeling about learning curve in particular. Probably the biggest feedback I get in the beginning of the semester when I'm asking students for feedback is a frustration with learning curve about having to answer questions that they've been asked before. By the end of the semester, that's probably one of the most appreciated aspects of learning curve is the redundancy, because they've found in their experience that they now have learned the material because the questions are asked several times throughout the learning curve activities. The other aspect of feedback are written evaluations and numerical evaluations, and what I had turned in to me, or the university had turned in and I've received those, I had 45 written responses on the evaluations, and 43 of those 45 were very positive, and many of them articulated their appreciation of learning curve. The numerical evaluations, out of a 4-point scale, the average over all 6 sections of about 500 students was a 3.83. So I'm getting positive feedback about the model, and also in that particularly about learning curve as the Friday class. Now, I have to say that I use learning curve. I open it up on Thursday evenings at 4 and have it due Sunday night at 10, so that they have all weekend to work on it. They don't have to do it during the class time that was there if we met in the classroom. So they can do it at their convenience anytime over the weekend. But if it gets past 10 o'clock on Sunday night, they've lost the opportunity, unless, of course, they have a valid reason why they weren't able to do it that weekend. So what I want to share is that because I had that importance of understanding the significance of the review exams and how people did on the test, I kept track of, and my GA was great working with me on doing an analysis then of what it would look like if we took the average exam scores of the students who completed all their learning curve activities versus those who completed less than all of the assignments, And you can see here that the average exam scores for those who completed all of the learning curve activities over 3 semesters was, those who completed all of them, the average was 85.81%. And the average exam scores of those who completed less than all of the learning curve activities was 74.6%. This is a pretty significant difference. I found that same significance again when I looked at the review exam, those who took advantage of the review sessions that I held. This was a great discovery for me, or a great uncovering of what I was seeing and what I thought I would see, but to actually have a graph that showed me the difference helped me to alleviate some of that guilt maybe I was feeling about not being in the classroom on Friday, because it appears that the learning is taking place if they're engaging in learning curve activities. I also wanted to not only know what the difference was between those who completed all assignments versus those who completed less than. I wanted to get a breakdown of the comparison if students did some but not all. So we did a deeper analysis and took a look at what the average exam score was for those who completed 0 to 33% of the activities, those who completed 34% up to 66%, those who completed 67% up to 99%, and then again those who completed 100% of the activities. So the descriptives that came out of those analyses, you see here the mean for those who completed up to 33% was a 55% on exam scores, etc. We can see that a little bit more clearly when I pull the graph up, and we see the significance was strong, statistical significance was strong between the groups. And when you look at the graph itself, we see what I hoped, what I suspected I would find, and that's a stair-step progression for those who completed certain percentages of the exams. I had no real reason to break it down in this particular grouping, yet it seemed reasonable to me just to have 4 different groupings to do. We could have, and in fact I did have my graduate assistant group them into 5 sections and into 6, and just to see if that stair-step pattern would continue, and it did, though it wasn't. The more groupings you have, of course, the less of a difference you might have as well. So what this, again, showed to me was the value of the learning curve activities. Because I changed variables last fall, it was, I couldn't really do some comparisons between semesters of learning curve itself. I've continued to just group all as I have more and more students. I believe I get a stronger sampling, a stronger study of the effectiveness to put all of the scores together. And as you can see, there's a large number of scores, 7,247 scores that are thrown into each of these tests. So I feel like it's a strong testament in my situation that suggests that learning curve is something that's helpful. And as I get the anecdotal response from students as well, I'm convinced that this adaptive learning, adaptive quizzing, is something I'm going to continue, and learning curve has been a product that for me has worked well, and I intend to continue to utilize that as well. So, you know, that takes me through kind of the history that developed where I am today in terms of the redesign, and now what I just could call the design of general psychology here at Northwest that I've been in charge of. And I need to say that I appreciate definitely the total team that I have. The 2 adjuncts, B.K. Taylor and Sarah Jackson, have worked out well for me this year, and their work with students, and Justin Hicks, who is my graduate assistant and has done a great deal of this statistical analysis for me. So with that, I'd throw it back at you, Scott, I guess, if this would be a time to take on some questions or have conversation or whatever you'd like to do.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, people are on mute because with a lot of folks, there tends to be ambient noise. We have a couple of questions. If people have additional questions, please just submit them via chat, and I can read them as they come in. First question we have is, why did you decide to allot class time to the quizzing versus requiring it as homework?
Could you repeat that, Scott? I'm sorry, I was a little,
Not a problem. Why did you decide to allot class time to the quizzing versus requiring it as homework?
I felt that it was more palatable. It is homework, but I wanted to, I guess I wanted to emphasize the importance of it. And for me to say, you have class, it's just not in the room. And you can have this class whenever you want it over the weekend, but it's going to take you anywhere from an hour to 2 hours to complete this task, given now the difficulty ranking that I put up on it. So I really felt that it was, number one, an opportunity for them to see the significance that I saw in it. The other was, because I had 6 sections and I had this many students, I was putting a great deal of effort. I was lecturing 6 times on Monday. I was in class 6 hours on Wednesday with 500, anywhere from 400 to 500 students. I'm replying to, a number of emails every day that are significant, and I thought it was also a means by which I could maintain some energy for myself and just see how it worked in terms of the outcome.
Thank you. We have another question. How did online quizzes, do you have information on how online quizzes compared to written quizzes?
I don't have that. I don't have that comparison because I never had the written quizzes in my design before. What I know is that my retention is good in this, and it appears that the content retention is as good as or better than the traditional design was, as I've gotten feedback from colleagues in the psych department as they then work with these students that move on into psychology as a major.
Thank you, Don. I have another question here that's probably more for me to answer. Is Learning Curve a proprietary system? Parentheses, something my college would need to buy access to, and is it compatible with Canvas? The answer is yes. Learning Curve is proprietary. It is an adaptive quizzing engine available with the majority of Macmillan texts, Macmillan being Bedford, Freeman, and Worth publishers, imprints. And yes, it is compatible with Canvas. It will integrate with Canvas. And certainly I can touch base via email to the person who asked that and give them more information, or you guys could, anyone that wants information, could indicate on the survey that they would like information, and we'll be following up afterwards as well. And unless anyone's got another question, we have come to the end of our questions. Oh, wait, okay, we have one more. If it is possible, please let me know, do you use a question test bank, and how much of a customization is allowed?
I use a question test bank from the publishers, from Worth, and what I do online testing, and I use a question pool technique so that no student has the identical test. Therefore, I can have a sort of a design that allows for students to be out there and not look at somebody else's screen and copy off of them. It's going to be a different question format for each person. In Respondus, where I develop the exams, it allows for a great deal of customization if I would choose to, in terms of editing the question or changing the style of the answer, etc. So it allows for that to take place.
Excellent. And just to distinguish between the two, the test bank that Don's referring to certainly does allow for customizations. Learning Curve doesn't allow for as much customization, but it is adaptive. Again, if anyone wants information on Learning Curve in the survey that is going to launch after this webinar, please indicate that you'd like information, and of course we'll be in touch and giving you information on that. You can also visit learningcurveworks.com, where you can see samples of what Learning Curve activities look like. I believe that is the end of our questions, and I thank everyone for their time today. Thank you very much, Don. This has been wonderful. We do appreciate you guys making the time and making our first webinar week, our first EdTech week, a success. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Scott.
Bye.